I learned a new word or a new sentence this morning, GIDAYI. I hope you understand what I'm saying. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. In 2015, I gave a speech on a stage in Vienna, and it was called, "What if this device could change your eating habits?" And with this device, I meant this device. It's a little machine that can grow insect proteins in your home. It produces fly larvae, and in the front part, in the bubbly part, the flies live, they mate, they lay eggs, they fall back into the second part, and there they feed on food waste from your kitchen, and then they can be harvested. And I was trained as an industrial designer, but I dedicated my work towards both human and animal food and everything that really comes with it. And when I talk about insects or insect proteins, I mostly talk about this insect. And I know presenting this in front of the culinary world and the gastronomy world, this is not necessarily the most appetizing or sexy image that you can show. But during the process of working with insects, I could really oftentimes see beyond kind of the more disgusting aspects, of this animal. They're actually very clean in their process of how they grow. They have a very interesting biological mechanism to actually self-harvest, so they crawl up a little ramp in the device. They fall into a little drawer where then you can take it out, freeze them, and, well, cook them into a delicious meal. Now, would you eat that? Show of hands. Not too bad, I would say. This is really, of course, an unusual sight, and was very provocative back in 2012, 2013 to show this picture. But what if I told you that you are already eating them? Every single one of you eats about 500 grams of insects every year. They just come into everyday food, so it's not while riding a bicycle with an open mouth or sleeping with an open mouth or anything of that sort. No, they actually processed into grain products, into soups, in frozen vegetables. So you eat insects 0.5 kilogram every year. And what if I told you that this dish, as compared to traditional meat production, saves thousands of liters of water and several hectares of land? Only this dish alone by itself. Still not convinced? Granted, insect eating might not be everyone's thing. And that's why, fast forward, 7 years later, after several milestones and prototypes, me and my team, we're building factories. So here you see our insect factory in Vienna, Austria. We're operating it out of there. And this produces insects on a large scale. However, with the main purpose of not eating them, but actually feeding them to animals. So what happens is this factory turns industrial amounts of food waste, be it vegetable waste, fruit waste, grain waste, or any types of waste, with the black soldier fly larvae, this insect, into insect proteins that are then used as a feed for pets, for dogs and cats, but also for fish, pigs and poultry. That's where this story started, in Hong Kong. I used to live for many years, I lived in Hong Kong, and I have to say I'm a big fan of the food world. I love seafood, and whenever I walked these markets, the dried seafood market, I saw all these different kinds of food, and I wondered how it works, where it comes from, because I grew up on a farm, so I wanted to learn more. But I saw this abundance of food on the one hand, and I think that's what you have in this country as well. But on the other hand, I saw a lot of pollution and waste and inefficiencies in the food system. And that's how I started to work with it. the food and feed processing industry, as well as retailers, waste thousands of tons of food every year. And they're actually losing money on it. So you see bread waste, grain waste, or fruit and vegetable waste. And this can be perfectly transformed into insect feed. If we continue to produce proteins the way we do right now, we're going to contribute to the second biggest factor for climate change. By 2030, we're going to have only 10% of the fish in the ocean, and I think that's what the tourism industry lives from. Fish in the ocean, beautiful ocean that you can look at while you're having a nice meal. So that's where insects come in. Insect proteins are very close in terms of their efficiencies as fish proteins, so they can be fed to fish, to animals, and they digest very rapidly into muscle mass and into proteins. That's how our factory looks like and works. It contains of 3 major steps. The first is feed processing. So we have a biology department that would take the waste, for example, also pre-consumer waste, so cutlings from restaurant chains or supermarkets. And our machinery processes it and formulates it into the best possible feed for insects. It then inserts it into the second step, which is growing. So feed is inserted into trays. Baby insects are being put into those trays, and then within only 7 days, they grow to a harvestable insect. So that's the third step, harvesting and end product processing, where they're then separated from the feed, the remaining feed and the manure, and they're processed into proteins, fats, and fertilizer. That's the side product of production. So again, here looking at stillage waste, for example, a byproduct from starch production, goes into the factories. We actually have, you can say, an industrial Nespresso model. So we deliver baby larvae that are as small as a coin size for every unit of protein production. And they are inserted into the factories. The food waste comes from customers on site, and the products that are produced then, they are also sold by our customer. So we deliver factories and babies, and the customer does the rest. So you can really see it as similar to the chicken industry, for example, that sells little chickens. And that's the scale of it. So you see roughly the size of our factory. That's how it integrates into one of our customer sites. It's starch processing, but we also work with retailers. And the results of it, the impact of it, is massive. So we can save 92% of emissions per ton of protein produced as compared to soy protein, which is often used as a feed. 5 tons of fish in the ocean are saved for every ton of fish meal produced. So if you produce salmon or other types of fish in aquaculture, you need for 1 ton of feed 5 tons of fish in the ocean. And that's going away from the ocean, and that's actually a really big factor for climate change. 70% of emissions are saved as compared to composting. So why is this relevant in the sense of gastronomy, the culinary world, tourism? Because if we use waste management effectively to save our resources, we can protect the land and waters for people to come visit, to preserve the planet for people and for the enjoyment of it. So that's the story of how a very small product idea over several years turned into a factory, turned into an industrial project that can save millions of tons of waste, millions of tons of resources every year, and that saves a lot of emissions every year as well. And it's probably the story of how a not-so-sexy larva can be or might be just the hero of how food can save our climate and can save the planet for the people. Thank you.